Today, I am having a conversation with Arno Brand, the CEO of Gratomic. For those of you that don't know yet, Gratomic is one of the very few up-and-coming graphite players with very interesting properties in both Namibia and in Brazil. We will be talking all about graphite, Gratomic, and of course plenty of other topics, so now let's get into it. So I would like to now welcome you, Arno Brand, to the channel. It is a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much, Stijn. Thank you for having me, and thank you for your continuous support.
Sure, awesome. So to start the conversation, could you perhaps tell us a bit about yourself and maybe dive a bit deeper on your backstory and how you became the CEO of Gratomic?
Sure. Depending on how much time we have today, it could be a very long and very short story.
A couple of minutes would be perfect.
I was the original founder of the Aukam graphite deposit in Namibia in 2012. I stayed on as a project manager on the project at that point in time. I was working for a boutique bank as chief metals, head of metals and energy trading for a company called Boswell Capital, Boswell International. Particularly, that firm was probably the largest or second largest uranium trader broker in Canada. We worked for a bunch of utilities. So at that point in time, it was not possible for me to endeavor to take on a CEO or officer role. We continued to steer the project forward from a consulting basis, project management perspective during the course of 2012 over through to 2016. 2016, I retired. I joined with a former partner of mine called Sheldon Inventosh. At that point in time, we became co-CEOs. Spent a lot of time and effort in Gratomic in building up the pilot facility at that time on the Aukam graphite mine. We did a lot of research and development into the graphene industry at that time until we realized, the graphene industry really isn't poised yet to, have that massive acceleration of, graphite into the market. So they steadily, stopped putting money into the graphene R&D. It's not that we completely sidelined it. It's just, there's, so many graphene companies out there that you can pick from. 2020 in March, I, took over as CEO of the company. And, that's when we did our original CapEx raise to start building out the Aukam graphite project, and I've been here ever since.
That's an amazing story, quite a rich history for sure. How do you think your experience in those other ventures you've done before helps you out in your current role?
Well, you know what? I had an incubation business for a long time while I was working with the boutique bank next to my the nuclear trading that we were doing on the side. The incubation company really got me going around the world looking at assets. We put together quite a few companies during the course of my career. Gave me in-depth understanding of what to look at in an asset in order to, for that asset to stand a chance at making it through into production. We've been fairly successful. We've built quite a few mines around the world. The understanding how to structure offtakes between end users, and miners really gave me an in-depth understanding on, how the commercial aspect of the business works. Really gives you a proper understanding on how to read market trends. You want to be in the market at the right time, and you want to set offtakes at the right time. Whenever you're in an appreciating market, it's definitely the perfect time, to go and set long-term contracts. Markets aren't always as lofty as they are today. Eventually they start turning. So appreciating markets is probably the miner's best friend. That's exactly what we're seeing today. It gives you the power and control to set contracts, long-term offtake arrangements. And, that's exactly where we're at Gratomic at this point in time. And just waiting for the opportune moment during this massive market acceleration in graphite pricing, and seeing which of the partners are willing to pay most.
That's amazing. I really like that. And that appreciating market really fits into what I was going to ask you next. I was going to focus on graphite, of course, the commodity that Gratomic specializes in. Could you perhaps explain, in your opinion, why graphite is such a great investment opportunity, and maybe go a bit deeper into why graphite is needed, and what are some of your expectations for graphite demand heading into the future?
So the graphite market has several aspects that makes it very interesting. Let's start with the critical metals and minerals list. U.S. critical metals and minerals list out there. Focus on every single mineral on that list, or metal on that list. These minerals essentially are the key components that make up battery materials that go into one of the fastest growing global markets out there, which is the EV battery industry. We look at a worldwide market where you have a few billion cars driving around the world, with internal combustion engines. It's a long road to slowly phase those out and replace them with electric vehicles, which is the ultimate benefit to everybody that walks this planet. Graphite is the one component in that car which is not recyclable. You can recycle almost every single other metal in the battery other than graphite. So why is graphite the most interesting one? Well, makes up almost 60% of the battery, and there's very few miners out there that can actually go from mine to market. And we look at how many mines came into circulation since 2012. I can count 2, 3. Right now, the world is on a trend where you're going to have to bring on a massive producer on an annual basis, and in order to simply keep up with demand. And synthetic graphite is there on the side. Synthetic graphite is great. It's got the energy capacity, but it can never ever compete with natural graphite in terms of energy density on the anode side. So every battery in the world is still going to have a sprinkled mix of synthetic and natural graphite. And I see that as the perfect opportunity for a company like Gratomic to go find best-in-class assets around the world, and really focus on hitting it home with bringing on one mine every 18 months.
Makes a lot of sense, and I think you explained it in a very concise and easy to understand manner. So thank you for that. So from your story, I understand that electric vehicles are the biggest driver for graphite demand. And are you recognizing any other potential sources of graphite demand too, or is that just the main one that you're focusing on for now?
So in general, the world demand for graphite is steadily on an uptick of about 6% a year. We see a continuous increase of about 70,000 tons of graphite a year to 100,000 tons of graphite a year, which is the equivalent of either 3 small operations or 1 significantly large operation. That demand is primarily still driven by crucibles, electrodes. You go into refractory, lubricants, graphite foil. There's a lot of graphite applications out there that steadily drive demand. With the uptick in oil prices, I wouldn't be surprised if graphite foil demand starts kicking up again. It's tightly correlated to commodity markets in general. Geothermal well casings, same story. If you it's a great insulator out there. So it's a perfect material to use in geothermal well casings. It really depends on which sector of the market is expanding, but we see a continual increase of about 6% per year. And the graphite, the anode market as a class within the graphite space is increasing. It's expected to increase, probably about 3 or 4-fold over the next 5 to 10 years. So, it's a very attractive case in many regards, but the electric vehicle industry is just going to, overshadow any other application.
That is quite amazing to be able to pick your brain regarding the bull case for graphite. But of course, there's also the other side of the coin. There's also the bear case we should talk about. Two concerns I often hear online are solid-state batteries as the first one and different potential anode materials as the second one. Could you perhaps dive a bit deeper into those two, what your opinions of those threats are, and do you think they are serious enough to impact graphite demand heading into the future?
So solid-state batteries is a technology that, still requires a lot of research. A company like Gratomic obviously has its eyes squarely on that market. It still requires graphite to a certain degree, but how much, we probably wouldn't know for some time until it's actually a real commercial concept. But we keep our minds fairly open to all new technologies coming in. And, you look at silicone batteries, yes, they're great. Silicon is a known additive in, natural anodes that are used in lithium-ion batteries today. It's no secret. It's a great material. Once they come up with the, pristine formula on how to contain that massive expansion index on silicon, I probably imagine that it will be a very successful anode material. But again, the world's not there yet. I mean, it's still a fairly small market. And, for now, we stick with what works. And, the thing that will probably end up working best, as we've seen in the past, is a combination of, graphite material and silicon material together in a battery. And that's of course the perfect hybrid. Right? They have both great characteristics to add, and why not? There's a lot of expanse, opportunity in the market, and the more technologies come on board, the better. And we just make sure that graphite forms the basis of it.
So now we've crossed off graphite as a commodity. Let's focus on Gratomic as a business. A lot of the viewers might not be intimately familiar with Gratomic. So could you perhaps explain the two facilities you're currently constructing in Namibia?
By all means, yeah. So the Aukam graphite vein graphite asset in Namibia is one of the highest grade graphite assets in the world. It's a very, very unique deposit that offers quite a dramatically high grade coming out of the old workings. And the processing plant that was constructed on Aukam was built up to be about 20,000 tons per year of output capacity. It's a very unique plant. It's one of the few plants in the world that was constructed to take graphite to anode grade material without the aid of heat treatment or acid treatments. We're fairly advanced into the commissioning of the processing plant. Commissioning, of course, is the stage just before you go into pre-production. Legally, you can't say you're in production until you hit a 51% of your production capacity. So what we're doing basically right now is making sure every single component of the plant is functioning properly. Every piece of equipment is calibrated properly to treat the material as it should. It's a very complicated process. It's probably each piece of equipment probably has like a few hundred different criteria to check off before you can start up the machine. And then once you start it up, you got to calibrate it. It's run back and forth with logs between pilot facility versus actual facility to make sure that you're doing things right.
So Arno, real quick, this is all for the Aukam processing plant where you take the raw vein graphite and turn it into a graphite product, right?
Correct, yes. This is all the first stage of that processing facility. Call it primary beneficiation, right? So this is taking graphite from a head grade of 45% to 55%, and introducing it to that processing facility through means of flotation to take that up to about 98.7 to 99% graphite. This is all first phase processing. Now, Aukam, we do two phases of processing. One is wet, one is dry. So after this graphite product runs through the wet circuit, it comes into the dry circuit. And the dry circuit basically is where the real magic happens. We've partnered with a company that has provided us with a patented technology that we're licensing, in terms of air classification, which essentially uses the aerodynamics of a certain flake of that graphite and only floats off within that air classification system the purest of the pure graphite that comes off at the top, and everything that doesn't meet that purification level goes out at the bottom. The bottom stuff, grades 97, 98%, that goes to that 6% market, 6% annual growth market that we talked about earlier, which is more conventional market. Welcome to lubricants, welcome to brake pads, crucibles, refractories. What comes out at the top, cream of the crop, nice expensive material, and that's shipped off to the gigafactories all around the world, right? And that air classification technology is actually the single most thing that I'm excited about at the company, because it's something that you can now go and apply to similar projects around the world. So when we went after Capim Grosso in Brazil, we found a project with very unique characteristics, very similar to what we saw in Aukam. It's always the beauty of the evolution of a mining company, right? You can set out, step out, and you learn your deposit type. You perfect that deposit type, and then you go around the world and you look to replicate what you have that works. And we found that in Capim Grosso. And, companies like Gratomic can now go into Capim Grosso, which is more of a conventional crossover between flake graphite and vein graphite, and extremely high-grade deposit. We're sitting there with almost 3 times commercial grade, extremely long strike, very, very good continuity in the graphite, very soft material at surface, all economic contributors that make graphite companies like us smile, because it has the attributes to fit into that lower quartile of a cost curve. And then you come in and you introduce that air classification technology to that particular circuit, and what you end up with is a beautiful, beautiful closed circuit of 99% graphite coming out at the lower possible cost curve. And we're currently, in Toronto, busy organizing the metallurgical test work for Capim Grosso. My guess is it'll probably be very, very close to what we're seeing in Aukam. And, the only thing better than one outcome is 2 outcomes, right? So
that's amazing. That's great to hear. You already started talking about Capim Grosso, which I was going to ask you about in just a bit, but you gave us so many insights that I didn't want to stop you. You haven't really touched on Luderitz Bay just yet. Could you perhaps explain that facility in a bit more detail?
Well, the best way to describe it, Stijn, is once you step out to become a mining company, right? You gotta, have a perspective on how do I add more value for shareholders, right? Because you're gonna get to that $3,400 price point, and you're not gonna get much further than that on your mining circuit, right? So our job is maximize the value on the mine, which is $3,400 a ton. So imagine you have 20,000 tons coming out of Aukam a year, 40,000 tons coming out of Capim Grosso a year. Bring in a few other magic projects, to double, triple that over the next 10 years. That's all fantastic, right? But how do you get that multiple up? And the multiple comes when, good people go around doing good things by expanding themselves as far up the additive manufacturing chain as you possibly can. And, additive manufacturing adds value to a multiple degree for shareholders. So Luderitz is exactly that. We're going to take our beautiful Aukam product as it comes out of the air classification system. We're going to move it over to the Luderitz facility. We're going to tinker with it and turn it into an industrial park where, you now produce micronized and spherinized and altered atomic layer deposition material. Really play with it to add that multiple and take it from 3,400 to 8,000 to, $12,000 to $15,000 a ton material. And then, we're right on the port, a berth away from, opening up all lines of, dollar signs to the rest of the world. And, that's essentially why Luderitz Bay is there. I mean, we are very quickly becoming one of the largest landholders in the city. So not done yet.
Wow, that is quite amazing. Great to hear your insights on this matter. Perhaps you can share a bit more on the timelines regarding Aukam's development as well as Luderitz Bay, if that's possible.
So my Aukam development, as far as I'm concerned today, is hopefully we start seeing dollars turning out in Q1, Q2 this year. It's quick enough. It's faster than any other company could have done it. We've really put our heads down and worked our butts off. Continue to do so. Luderitz Bay is really a 3-year plan. So right now what we're starting to do is do the general layout, do the general design of an industrial park where we can really come in and tinker with the graphite after processing. I really focus on that anode material post-processing. Our partners at Forge Nano, which we'll probably discuss later, they're really going to help us a lot with that. Looking forward to using that ALD technology in Luderitz, and of course, hopefully facilitate that through means of solar power. Keep that footprint nice and clean, and so on and so forth.
That's amazing. Well, those are actually 2 questions I was going to ask you. Solar power, which you of course released a news report for in April 2021, I believe. Could you perhaps share the current state of affairs regarding solar power and Aukam?
So, I really got to thank the world for the greener push, because, it really made us look at alternative technologies in terms of power generation. Solar has 2 major benefits for Gratomic. It takes us away from diesel, which is expensive as hell, and puts us into something that's closer to 5 cents a kilowatt hour. So thank you for the green push, but it also really reduces, carbon emissions and brings Aukam, something that's really close to all of our hearts and is leaving a better tomorrow for all our kids, the future generation. Right? So it definitely forms a major part of our principles and values in the company.
That is awesome. And you also already started talking about Forge Nano. Perhaps you could dive a bit deeper in the partnership you guys, Gratomic and Forge Nano, are having, and what that ALD layer coating enables you to do with your products.
So, no surprise, Gratomic is a very forward-looking company. We like, keeping our eyes on the future in terms of changes that are happening in our space. And Forge Nano was exactly that, right? Forge Nano was that beautiful technology that came in that could replace traditional carbon coating. And for me, that is critical. Once again, it takes away from dirty and yucky and brings it into the world of clean tech, which is, really something that sits well with our principles and values within the company. And, it's no surprise that Volkswagen and LG Chem made a significant investment into Forge Nano and a partnership into Forge Nano. And, we're striving away. There's a lot of surprises in terms of, bringing that technology to the market in the next 3 years. Guys are going to have to stay tuned and watch what we do. But, it's probably going to be something that keeps people surprised and interested in the years to come.
Wow, that is quite amazing once again. We've already talked about the 2 facilities in Namibia, but of course, aside from Namibia, Gratomic also has its eyes set on an additional property in Brazil called Capim Grosso. You've already started talking about this property just a bit ago. Is there anything you want to add regarding the importance of this most recent acquisition to Gratomic's assets?
Well, we took a very aggressive approach on Capim Grosso. It's a replay of the rumble in the jungle, I guess, a place where there's no trees. But, really hitting it hard with the drilling right now. We're very, very impressed with the initial 3 programs we ran on the property and just kept going and hitting it with trenching and sampling. And, couldn't stop because it's one of those things. The graphite just kept creeping along every trench. And very excited right now to drill that massive graphite body that we can see it's dropping out at surface. We're hoping that 5,000 meter drilling program, could accelerate its way through, Q1 into Q2. And if we play our cards right, hopefully, there's something to report on that before mid-year. And definitely looking forward to that.
That would, of course, be amazing news. And for the viewers, Capim Grosso is obviously not a fully completed mine just yet. Arno, maybe you could answer what, in your opinion, is the most critical information and news we investors should watch out for in regarding to exploration and early mine development, especially for this Capim Grosso property.
Well, it's always a tough one because as an investor, you want to, there's generally 400 or 500 graphite projects out on the market. And, it's the one thing that really makes sense for us from our perspective when we walk onto a project like Capim Grosso. There's a couple of factors that really play a dramatic part in qualifying it as a Gratomic asset. And if it's not a Gratomic class asset, we walk away. And I tell you, we looked at 120, 180 of these things, and we walked away because it just doesn't make sense. We have some very, very, very smart people. You pull out the canvas and the finger paint and you be creative and you come up with some great synergies and ideas. You go and test them in the field, and sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but eventually you stumble upon something like Capim Grosso, something that is a neutral jurisdiction, that is mining friendly. Our province is one of the most mining friendly provinces in the world. Thank God. Brazil is also one of the biggest mining communities. So number 2, you want to have the grade. Don't play around with things that are grading 2, 3, 4, 5% graphite. You are wasting your time. The economic grade 9 out of 10 times for graphite is 6.8% and up. Right? Do not waste your time with anything under that. Why would you waste your time trying to mine something that is, sub-economic grade? Most graphite mines that are mining today, if they're 4%, they're marginal. Marginal. You lose money most times of the year. 5%, they're still suffering. Markets take a little bit of a dip, you're out of the money. And you also got to consider dilution and strip. If the strip ratio and the dilution, is not attractive, run for the hills as fast as you can, because you're just never, ever going to be able to beat Mother Nature, right? So when we look at these deposits, we really focus on, first of all, the grade, the jurisdiction, the continuity of the resource, unless it's something of a vein deposit that, starts at like a 90% little vein, propelling its way to surface, like 13-meter widths, then, I don't mind dilution in a case like that because you're mining black gold. But, in terms of Capim Grosso, it really ticked all the boxes. Very low dilution, very low waste. Sits at surface. It's open pittable. It really ticked all the boxes. And then it comes to the most important thing in mining, which is metallurgy. If you, don't buy something unless the metallurgy works. Because I've been, my history as an incubator, I've sat on deposits to the scale of 3 or 4 billion tons. And before we did anything, we went through metallurgy. And, if the metallurgy didn't work, run for the hills, because what are you doing there? Like, if you can't process it, ignore it, because it's nothing but a purple unicorn. Just walk away and focus on the key credentials that make deposits real.
Awesome. Thanks for your insights regarding that. So as an investor, we should mainly focus on the drilling results. Is that what I'm hearing from you regarding this?
Well, focus on metallurgy. Look at the drilling, of course. Of course, at Aukam, we did things completely backwards. We drilled initially and got a very high sense of confidence that the graphite is fairly continuous in nature. We're drilling it now still. It's one of those deposits that probably drill for the rest of my life, and never finish drilling, because it's a very robust asset. So it's funny how it works, but eventually, once we drill out enough, kilometers, you'll have a fairly accurate assessment of what is there. And once you have that accurate assessment, you bring it to the market. I mean, we're not scared. We're not really worried about, what is to come, because we know that what we have is incredibly robust. I mean, we're still hitting graphite 240 meters down dip on Aukam, right? So at Aukam, we could afford to do it in reverse, because we could see the graphite petering out 350 meters in front of us on a hill. And that gives you a great sense of confidence. Also have the lower adits, which gives you a perfect 3-dimensional perspective of how the geology works. And so we could actually afford to, do it in reverse, because we could see initially that we had 10 to 20 years of sustainable mine life. And, now as we're drilling deeper and deeper into the, into the earth, we start realizing that, this is quite an extensive structure. But drill results are very important, of course. Without drilling, where are you gonna go? Like, it's your guide. It's your guide to the unknown, unless there is a known. Like we have at Aukam, which is a 3-dimensional known, which is the equivalent of a person standing in a massive drill hole, right?
Yeah. Okay, thanks for your insights regarding this. Like you just said, at Aukam, you did it all the way around. You first constructed the processing plant and then started doing the classic mining studies. Is this also what we can expect from you regarding Capim Grosso, or what is the plan of the?
Yeah, so the two are incredibly different in nature. Capim Grosso, of course, is not a vein graphite deposit. It's probably a hybrid between vein and flake. At Aukam today, we did drill it historically before we started. As soon as we had the necessary confidence internally to switch over and focus on metallurgy, which at that point became more important than, if you have enough material for 10 years, stop. Just stop. Don't focus on, the metallurgy, because that is the next important thing, right? So, we didn't turn a blind eye to drilling, because we had a 3-dimensional perspective on drilling. Just vein graphite deposits are very difficult to drill. They take a very long time to drill. And, conventional flake deposits are much easier because they're more naturally lying bodies. Veins are systems that come up like this where there's crust and sometimes go down 2-3 kilometers, right? So it makes two very different investment criteria for a company like Gratomic. Capim Grosso is a lot easier to grow that company.
Makes a lot of sense. Okay, sure. Thank you. As an investor, but also on this YouTube channel, we are constantly looking for competitive advantages. So in the words of Warren Buffett, looking for companies with durable moats. Arno, what is in your opinion Gratomic's biggest current competitive advantage, or perhaps a competitive advantage you are developing for the future?
Well, we don't like competing with others because we don't like making others look bad. But essentially, when you look at it, it's the one thing that sets Gratomic aside from everybody else in the world is we have a hyper focus on lower quartile cost curve assets. Nobody else has, sat down and tried to figure out that the only people that ever make money and control the commodity are the guys that sit on the lower quartile of the cost curve, right? So then you control the price and you control the commodity. That's basically number one criteria for Gratomic. We sit there, nobody else is going to even, come close. So in graphite, that essentially means you're sitting between $180 to $295 a ton of operating costs on a C1 cash basis. Very low cash cost. That's of course through that primary beneficiation stage. We're not talking about secondary and tertiary upgrading. So we're not talking from 98 to 99. We're talking from 55 or 17 to 90, 97, 98, 99. So that is our number one, I would say that is our number one, competitive edge against everybody else in the market. We have a hyper focus on those type of assets. And then we have, the equivalent of a superhero team that can just, it's like the bloody Justice League of graphite companies, right? It's just, go out and, take on every single challenge the world throws at it. And we step out and step in, and next thing you know, the guys are throwing concrete, and you're in a December period, reaching into January, you wipe your eyes out, and you're in June, and you've got half the processing plant standing. Yeah, I'm yet to meet another company in the world that can achieve that. I mean, I'm very, very impressed with the leadership team and the management team. Absolutely world class. And I'm but a CEO at the top, yapping away all day on the phone, but these are the guys that really, really work hard and put it and give it their all and motivate it to success. And without these people in our lives, it becomes an empty shell. Okay, those are our two main competitive advantages.
Well, that is amazing. Management for sure is extremely important, and hyper focus sure sounds important too. Would you say vein graphite is an inherent competitive advantage of Gratomic too, or how is your view regarding that?
Vein graphite definitely adds one component of competitiveness, and it's great. But then again, it falls into that same old typical structure, lower quartile of a cost curve that keeps its crystallinity, it keeps its order of carbon throughout the entire circuit. It processes from 55 to 99% like this. We throw some water on it, jump on it, step on it, and then it's 98%. But vein graphite has amazing competitive advantages when it comes to, being able to upgrade that material to, the desired quality that you want. And it preserves its pristine qualities as it goes forward.
I really like that analogy of throwing water and jumping on it, and all of a sudden it's 98%. That is really funny. Then if it's such easy material to work with and has so many advantages compared to other forms of graphite, why is Gratomic one of the only companies outside of Sri Lanka that's actually focusing on vein graphite?
Oh, it's just a really difficult thing to find. I mean, we found it in a couple of places around the world. I mean, you got to think about vein graphite as a commodity class. You got to have to look at it from a perspective where, you know, the gods of geology came and opened up the Earth's crust, and you have a swell of hydrothermal fluids rushing through that system, and you have carbon dioxide and methane, fighting its way up the system to the point where it hits an ambient pressure and temperature gradient where it drops from 1200 to 800 degrees Celsius. And it precipitates as perfectly pure carbon. It's nothing like it in this world. But oh God, how many places in this world can you go where you find a case where the gods stripped open the Earth's crust and brought up these hydrothermal fluids that precipitate hydrocarbon. A very, very difficult thing to find. We find it in minute quantities, right? I've seen it in Canada, like 2 or 3 or 4 centimeters widths, and you see it in 20 centimeters width in Canada, and you see this prospectors doing somersaults and running around and being very excited because it's really difficult to find.
That makes a lot of sense. And perhaps you can also dive a bit deeper into, from an investment perspective, what the biggest difference between a flake graphite and a vein graphite deposit really is, like I said, from that investment perspective.
From an investment perspective, comes down to probably, the most interesting thing about vein graphite is the purity that it occurs in the ground. 55%, 95% head grade. I mean, flake graphite, 1.2% to 12%. Sometimes you get lucky and you hit 22%, but good luck processing. It's generally affiliated with a ton of sulfides. And sulfides is not your friend in this industry. So,
So you want to continue talking about the difference between flake and vein graphite?
Absolutely. So in the case of vein graphite, it occurs naturally within the crust. These pristine, absolute gorgeous, mineralized systems that run up to 95% graphite. And it's very, very difficult to find around the world. And they're generally, very easily processable. You can process them from, 55% to 99% very, very easily, very, very quickly. So your CapEx is normally get a CapEx advantage when you have such a lovely project. Now, in the terms of flake graphite deposits, although there's some of them that are, really, really easy to process, but you get a better chance of finding purple Bay Street, right? It's very difficult to find these beautiful types of deposits of flake graphite deposits. And the problem is they're great, 1.2% to 22%. Very seldom in my life have I seen deposits, flake graphite deposits from all that 22% graphite. So in this particular case, vein is just the superior, natural occurring graphite to mine in the industry.
Makes sense. So it all comes back to purity and how easy it is for metallurgy to occur. Thus far we've talked about Aukam and Capim Grosso, but of course there's also this third property Gratomic has its right to, called Buckingham. Could you perhaps explain the current state of affairs regarding Buckingham, and what are your plans for this property in the future?
So we did inherit Buckingham with the company that we did an RTO back in 2014. We originally did have an obligation to spend some flow-through capital. And we spent that money fairly well. We drilled the deposit extensively. It does have a fairly high-grade head grade. It's very attractive asset. It's got scale to it. Right now, as it sits, we are probably going to start making some advancements on it again, starting in probably late spring into early summer. properties plan to spend another $2 million drilling her out, and there should be a lot of exciting results coming out of what is about to happen on that particular project, and hopefully I get to share that with you guys sooner than later.
That for sure sounds really exciting. Something else technical that I want to ask you. In a recent news report, Gratomic talked about the coin cell batteries that you guys are testing with your special kind of graphite. Could you perhaps explain the importance of these testings with these batteries, and also tell what we investors can expect from this?
We continue to get back interesting results, but in a good old Gratomic fashion, our peers would have probably put up 20 press releases over the course of this, singular test. We wait to get conclusive data and then bring it to the market when, the data is, fairly, is fairly complete. You don't come to the market with, fractional data sets, because it really takes away from, the concise system messaging you give shareholders, and it starts looking like you're trying to promote your company instead of your company.
Well, that is a really admirable trait from my perspective as an investor. As an almost close to this conversation, to anyone watching, perhaps you're like myself, or maybe a little bit further along in their life journey, could you perhaps give your number one piece of advice for them?
But that's a unique approach. I like it. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
The number one piece of advice to anybody is just keep working. Keep working hard. Make sure you surround yourself with good people doing good things, and just never give up. Just keep going, man. It's the only thing that sets people that are successful apart from the rest. It's people that persist and persevere, and the weak will often falter and fall, and the strong will keep going.
There you go. That is for sure a great way to end it. Any final thoughts from your end, Arno, regarding this conversation?
No, I'm very happy to finally had this opportunity to face-to-face. Stijn, I've always admired your YouTube channel. Thank you very much for all the good word that you spread about Gratomic and the hard work we've been doing, and really admire having people like you in our corner, for sure.
Thank you so much for those kind words. And with that said, thank you for watching. Peace.